The sun is shining, the day is beautiful, and now that you can see your screen clearly, what you're seeing, well, it leaves something to be desired. Your subject looks fine to the naked eye. Why does your camera suck so much? It's because of your camera's limited dynamic range. What the human eye perceives as light and dark is very different than what your camera perceives. How can you fix this one? You have three options. Make the shadows brighter, make the highlights darker, or give up. Well, we don't want to give up just yet, so let's see if we can brighten up the dark parts. How do they do this in Hollywood? They use lights called HMIs, which are bright enough to compete with the sun. Unfortunately, considering that these lights cost upwards of $300 to rent for one day, it might be impractical for your project, but not necessarily. For a more practical solution, grab one of these reflectors and a stand to go with it. It's cheap and effective, just as long as you're willing to periodically readjust it as the sun moves across the sky. This is the most practical way we know to make shadows brighter on your subject. Now let's try to make the highlights darker. This one depends on how much time you have to get your shot. If you have no choice but to shoot at high noon, your best bet is simply to find some shade. This simple step can make quite a difference. If you can't find anything to block the light, you can always make your own shade. Buy a small flag and put it above your subject's head. The downside of both these options is that you're pretty much restricted to wherever you set up all these light modifiers. If your schedule is a little more flexible, we recommend you avoid this time of day altogether. Even waiting until mid or late afternoon can yield much better results. There's also nothing wrong with waiting until an overcast day. Though your subject may look less saturated and a bit washed out, you won't have a problem with excessive contrast. But what if you have to shoot now, and you can't use a reflector or find any shade? You're going to have to choose whether you want to keep the shadows or highlights. Adjust your exposure accordingly. This is a purely aesthetic choice. We also advise that you have your subject face away from the sun. That way you can use the sun as a hair light. The best option, we think, is to have your subject face away from the sun, use a flag to diminish the sunlight hitting your subject's shoulders, and use a reflector to bounce the sunlight onto your subject's face. As a rule of thumb, newer and more expensive cameras have a higher dynamic range than cameras on the lower end. For cinema cameras like the Red Epic, dynamic range is hardly an issue at all, although even it comes nowhere close to your own eye. Of course, before you take out a second mortgage on your house, we implore you to try one of the options we presented. That's all for now. For more exciting video fixes, go to fixingyourvideo.com.